Hello, welcome to today's how-to video. Today we're going to be working with green stuff, and we're going to be working on making essentially hide blankets or hide sheets of different sorts. On this, my Crute broadside, I've used, I don't know if you can see, this is a green stuff sheet that I made and modeled it up to look like several pieces of hide stitched together. Now today we're actually building a curtain for an entryway to a Crute building. So it's a similar process, slightly different end result. But both, we're going to start with green stuff here and I'll walk you through the process. Now I already know the size of the opening that I need to cover in this particular building. So that's going to give me an idea of how much green stuff I'll need. It's a really small opening and it really doesn't take a lot of green stuff because you end up rolling it out pretty flat. So when you look at the size of what I'm going to actually cut off here, it may not seem like much. Alright, so now most of you know how to use the green stuff and such, but just real quickly if you don't, it's two-part epoxy type of a putty. In this case, blue and yellow make green. That's why it ends up being called green stuff. Fold it over, mash the two together. What I like to do is spin it out to get a little bit thinner, and then just twist to get kind of a spiral thing going. And then again, just keep pressing it, folding it, pressing it. Just keep working and kneading it until it is green. When I'm done with that, we'll be right back. Alright, there we go. A green ball. All set to begin. Now, what we're going to work with today is we're not going to actually be worrying too much about the quality of the finished product in the sense of, nice straight lines and textures and what have you. These are rough hides, and so I don't know if you've ever seen anything made of a hide, just a rough cut hide. There's nothing really fancy about it, especially if there's fur on one side of it. In this case, we're not going to deal with fur. These are just sheets of hide stitched together to make a doorway curtain. So the first thing we need to do is, since this is actually going to be a rectangular shape, roughly 2 by 1, I'm going to want to start by rolling it out a little bit to get a little bit longer than it is wide, and then we'll start pressing it. Now I'm going to get some water and wet the surface of the glass. I work on glass because it's a lot easier for me to do a lot of the modeling I do. Okay. I also like to use X-Acto blade that has the handle that's very smooth. That is, use it like a rolling pin. Now, when I put this together, I figured I was going to end up with just the right size, but I'm wondering if this is actually going to be more than I need. So I might just, that's actually probably a good thing. So again, 2 by 1. So I'm going to start by rolling this out till it covers roughly that. Actually a little bit more than 2 by 1. Whoops. You may want to get the handle wet too. You can use oil if you want. I personally try not to because it does make painting a little harder. You have to take very good care to wash it all off. But it also, that makes it really easy to keep from sticking. Now when I make green stuff molds, I will use oil. That only makes sense. Alright, so real quick, it's definitely the width I need. It needs to be teased out. Now one way I like to tease these out is I'll use one of the X-Acto blades, a rounded edge, to get some water, and then I will just pull it, knead it in that direction to pull it from the center out to make more of a rectangular shape. Okay, in all directions. Now, we're trying to get a rectangular form, well, roughly rectangular, that's 2 inches by 1 inch. But we're not, again, this is still not going to be the finished product because we need to make sure it's rolled out real thin. And I might end up actually having too much green stuff out there. Okay. So measure that and ensure that's 1. Needs to be pulled out a little bit more in this direction. So here I'm going to try it this way. It's kind of like that. There we go. Just about. Maybe a little more in this way. Now I noticed there are a couple bubbles in here. I don't know if you can see them on film, but there we go. I'll smooth those out. Okay. Whoa! Try to avoid that. Again, having the water helps minimize adhesion a bit. Okay, obviously I didn't wet this enough. Oh boy. It's not the end of the circus here. Alright, let's try that again. That isn't a bad thing. I mean, things like that happen if you're not careful. Yes, I just said I wasn't careful. But you want to make sure, get some nice just roll it out. And make sure you've got, yeah, that's 2. That's definitely 1 by 2 good. Yeah, so I was able to get it. Again, if you always try to keep that wet. Okay, there we go. So now it's you've got it laid out. It feels, it's nice and flat. And actually, I think I get the right amount. So now I'm just going to mark out the corners of my Yep, okay, good. So now it's just a matter of cutting. I place the knife to just kind of mark where I'm going to cut. Don't cut right away because it's a case of measure twice, cut once. So I want to make sure I have roughly square, or straight, I should say. Alright. Okay, then start cutting by simply pressing down and then twisting away this way. And then that allows you to come up. Okay, same thing here. Any place where you haven't cut real carefully will be a little bit messed up, but again, it's okay in this particular case. Here we actually want a little bit of a rough edge, which is normally hard to do. Because if you make, most rough edges are going to actually be really messy and distorted. So the rough edges you want here are essentially just slight additions, slight distortions. There we go. Okay. Alright. There. Now I want to go through and I want to pat the green stuff so that it holds its form, you know, where you were cutting it, if there's any loose edges. Okay. Now I want to start scraping it up off the glass. And do this slowly because you want to lift it so that you get some what do you call this, waviness to it. You don't want it to be a perfect sheet. Now it's gonna, while it's pliable like this, it's gonna start settling into a perfect sheet every time. So, but you want to try to get it up, and then you're gonna want to press fit it. Sorry, not press fit it, test fit it. Make sure it's the size you really need. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I've just confirmed it's the right size. I put more water on my glass. Okay. All right, now this sheet is going to be a two-part curtain, so I'm going to scribe a line, just an indent, roughly middle. Okay, and you don't have to make it all the way through. At this point, I'm going to keep it not all the way through. I'm not going to cut it all the way through yet. So let's zoom in a little bit, because now we're going to look more at the details. Alright, so now hides are kind of a quilt work, unless you actually pulled down a mammoth and took an entire mammoth hide to create this. Most likely they're going to be stitched together, several different hides, sometimes maybe even different animals. So again, this is my crute I'm talking about, not necessarily in real life. Usually they won't mix and match different leathers. Alright, so what I want to try to do is get a quilt work looking pattern. I've scribed the two halves to keep them kind of separate, so I know where there's got to be kind of a hard finish. I'm going to bring this one down, just pressing with the tip of my knife. And this is not necessarily going to be nice and even. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfectly square. But you want to press it in. These indentations you actually make are going to kind of look like the stitching that you in between the two panels. And then, so I'm going to bring one here. That knife is pretty sharp, so I'm going to go with something a little bit less sharp. I'm going to try to get my, if I have a toothpick, and I'm going to use that. Alright. Okay. Now notice there are two lumpy kind of areas here. That's okay. That's actually going to look like imperfections in the hide, so I'm not really worried about that. And then let's see, it's okay if it's kind of a big one. So how about I'm just going to do this. Alright, there we go. 4 sheets making that one up. Here I'm going to do one long sheet here, and then I'm going to carve it here. So this is only going to be 3. Okay. Alright, there we go. Now that I've got those cut, or textured, now I do want to complete this, and I'm going to cut, not the whole way through, I'm going to cut down maybe the bottom half all the way through, and then lift, because I want to separate these out. And this little cheat technique I have, the green stuff is gonna want to settle back in, so I'm gonna go ahead and use this toothpick and position it so that as this settles down, it's going to settle in around that toothpick, and it's going to actually get a little bit of a distortion. Let me get a second toothpick and we'll do the same on the other side. Alright, so I'm going to leave those the way they are. That way this one will kind of curl down, this one will kind of be left up. So to make sure that I've got separation here. Okay, that way I do have the look I'm going for. Alright, so that's all well and good from the basic texture. But now we have to make sure we're going to mount these to the top of that sill. So what I'm going to do there is actually use I'm going to cheat. You can do this a couple different ways. I'm usually actually going to be using a small tube, and I'm going to create a very small impression to look like there's a nail or a spike holding it into the wood or the mud. So, all right, let me show you how that's done. All right, I'm using very, very small brass tube. I honestly forget the diameter, but it's very, very small. And so I'm just going to place it and put a small indentation just like that. Don't drift too far away from the edge. Alright, then we'll leave that be. And while that's drying, settling in, oh, you know what? Let's do this. Let's take an old X-Acto blade. Let's lift the center here. And let's just see. Let's put some under there to kind of give it some more curvature. Doesn't need to be much. And here, just put some. These are actually just scraps of fiberboard from the primitive building I just built. But anything will work. Something that will just keep the edge from being perfectly straight. Then I'm going to go back and with the cast off, I'm going to go ahead and you can make whatever else comes to mind while this cures. I'm probably going to make a couple sandbags. So let's take a look at this when it's all cured. Alright, so there it's all cured. It's still kind of flexible. It's normal. That's all good shape, and here's some extra sandbags that I made from the leftovers. So I'll just paint those up. Now, the very first thing you want to do is make sure that everything kind of came out the way you wanted to. And I don't know if we can zoom in on that, hopefully. See, there's all the edging kind of held its form, so that it's not just a straight line across the bottom. Kind of looks, I like the way the bottom hangs down now. All the details in the pressings all worked. There's a couple areas that look like, what do you call them, air bubbles. But I think that just, in my opinion, makes it look more like imperfections in the hide and areas where it's kind of stretched and bubbling. Okay, all right. So now you got to go ahead and paint this. So first thing we got to do is go ahead and prime it, and then we'll come back and we'll put a light tan color on the actual piece. Okay, well I knew I was low on gray primer, but it's gone, it's empty. But I did get a light prime on the pieces. And this is a light tan I'm going to use. It's actually Delta's Ceramcoat, and it's a trail tan. Just a light color. I think that's important. I'm not going to do the sandbags right now. That'll be a slightly different color. Well, let's just go ahead and start with the regular just base coat. So just give it a good coat, nice and even. Now remember, we went ahead and painted or scribed in these different, what I'll call, I guess, panel lines, lines between the different hides. Don't worry about the different hides yet. What we're going to do is we're going to actually differentiate them during the next stage. So at this point, you're just going to give yourself a good base coat. Don't forget the edges around, because those edges will be seen on the model. Okay. So we'll let that dry. I'll go ahead and give it a second coat, and then we'll be back with the rest of the video. Alright, bye. Alright, now that I've got it base coated, 2 coats was enough to do it. There's still a little variation in the color. I don't know if you can, well, it can be seen on the video. But I didn't want it perfect, but I did make sure that I painted all in the same direction, so that I do only have vertical gradations. The reason I did that is that as dirt and stuff washes down, it'll have vertical streaks. So that's kind of why I used the actual paint brushing technique to bring out that particular light weathering. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an iron oxide brown type color, because I'm going to actually paint the very tip, or these indentations we made that represent the mounting pins or spikes that hold that into the mud brick building. So it's a matter of getting the get your finest paintbrush out that you can work with. I think I'm going to use the Army Painter's Psycho. Really small, but I think it works out well for me anyway. Alright, and I'm just a matter of putting those colors on. Now, the reason I did that first is because what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to build a layering, kind of a streaking rust. So since I'm figuring that these particular spikes that are holding the hides in place are ferrous based, they'll eventually oxidize, and the rainwater or whatever will come down and it'll streak the oxidization down the hide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Army Painter's Soft Tone, and using the same brush, I might go actually up to the Insane brush, but Insane Detail brush, but for now we'll just use the Psycho, because you really want a lot of control. And so now for each of the spikes, we're going to draw very slightly. We're going to draw some color down. So I use it right out of the bottle tip. Just, and then starting near the edge where it's less likely to be seen, just kind of pull it down. You just start at the spike and pull it down. And the further down it goes, the more diffuse it gets, the more it'll spread out. So that's why you want to start thin at the front, at the top, and then bring it wider down toward the bottom. You can actually get messier. Now, on this particular one, you'll notice there's a seam right here. So I'm actually going to stop the line there, because the water would the stain will collect right near there, and it won't necessarily bleed heavily into the next segment. At least that's the way I'm running it here. So this is all to get the effect you want. Doesn't need to be. There's no right or wrong way. You're trying to go for an impression. This is very much an artistic approach. I like the soft tone because it isn't too dark. You can actually start small and layer it up in case you do want it more heavily stained. Okay, so that's all taken care of. Let's see, that's the effect. Okay. Now the next step, we're going to let that dry completely, and then we'll hit that with a flat varnish so that it seals it in and we don't mar it. Now you'll notice there's no other, sorry for the pun, tanning going on as far as taking this darker color and moving around. By using the soft tone directly on the paint, the bare paint, it's going to actually seep in and sink into the paint itself. You're actually staining the paint a lot there, so you get a much nicer effect. Alright, so let's let this completely dry, then I'll hit it with a flat varnish, and then we'll be right back. Alright, now we've got it all dried, dull coated, we're ready to do the rest of the details. Now, the key to putting this stain on now is having that varnish on it, because that'll prevent it from really soaking into the rest of the paint and just really pool in the small places where little indentations or what have you. So I'm just going to fill my little cup here with some, again, using the soft tone from Army Painter. Alright, and I'm just going to trace the lines. Okay, and what we're going to do is draw the stain down. Definitely want to keep it thick here between the two portions. I want a slightly bigger brush than that. So what I'm trying to do is let the shader actually settle into the lines and not pool on the actual surface. Now you can see the difference in color. Let's do this. This side is much lighter than this, simply by going over with that simple wash of the shade. That's all you're trying to do, is get a slightly darker color. And again, streaking north and south or up and down, you want to do your brush strokes vertically. Okay, once you've done that, now you can take a brush and actually go through the lines that are the seams between each of the panels. It really is that simple. Now, what's interesting here is there's actually some coloration, not coloration, sorry, texture that was put in there by the just working the material, and so the toner is actually picking up some of those lines really nice. And if you think you get too much, then again, it's just a matter of pulling it off. And then putting it back in. There we go. Alright, so we'll leave that to dry and see how that turns out in the end. Okay? Alright, so those are in there real nice. Now what I want to do is kind of take the coloring, the shading a little bit stronger. So let me just set this up a little bit here, see if you can, how well you can see this. But okay, so this panel is lighter than this one, and I want to kind of accentuate some more of that. I want them to all be the same tone, but or shade, but I'd like certain ones to be darker than others, just to kind of give it some variation. So this one panel looks a little bit newer than the rest, so I'm going to try to go through and do that with shader and just kind of brush it more heavily onto one or two of the panels. Alright, let's see. So that one, let's go here in this upper corner here. This is going to be darker that way. There we go. Yeah. It's looking much better. Okay, and then I'll just go a little some more in here. So you don't want a lot of very, you know, real light and real dark. They're going to be very, very similar. That patchwork definitely seems to work. Now, one thing that I've noticed is that the seam between the two isn't quite as dark as it was when I first applied it, so I'm going to go ahead and add some more toner to that, because I want that to be nice and dark without being black. Yeah, that's one of the advantages of using the soft tone instead of the dark or strong, because you can layer it, add a little bit at a time just till you get that completed look. So there we go. Okay, so that's how that looks. So now you can see you've got the variation, oops, of the leather panels, and you've got the definition of the seams and the gap between the two sheets. Alright, so we're good to go with this. You could give another varnish coat if you want, but it's ready to go onto the model. Alright, so that's how you go ahead and use green stuff to make hide details, whether they're blankets or panels, or in this case curtains. Alright, okay, so thanks for enjoying it. Hopefully you did enjoy that. Thank you for watching and sticking with me through that. Don't know if you would use it given, you know, the different armors you might have, but it's nice, something to keep in the back of your head for little details you could put out there. Alright, go ahead and adapt this if you want to anything else that would be similar. Feel free to please share and like this video, and share it with your friends if you can. Subscribe please, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.